What are microbes exactly? Chapter 1, Topic 1.5. This topic goes over in more detail the nature of microbes. Specifically, we're going to go over cellular organization, the 5 types of microorganisms in more detail. Actually, I've got 6 because I include algae. So the 6 types of microorganisms we're going to talk about again are helminths, fungi, algae, protozoa, bacteria, and viruses. At the end of this recorded topic lecture, you should be able to meet the following objectives. Differentiate between prokaryotic and eukaryotic microorganisms, identify a 3rd type of microorganism, and compare and contrast the relative sizes of the different microbes. There are 2 basic organizational plans for cells. Cells that have membrane-enclosed organelles, which are like little organs inside the cell, including a nucleus, are called eukaryotes. This is a diagram of a eukaryotic cell. Cells that don't have a membrane-enclosed organelle are called prokaryotes. Now let's talk about the differences between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are generally 10 times smaller than eukaryotic cells. I've made the diagram of the prokaryote that much smaller because I want you to be able to see the details of the diagram. But in lab, you're going to be able to tell the difference. Suppose with your cheek scraping that you're going to be doing or have done, you're going to see great big flat cells with a little circle inside, and you're going to see little dots. The great big cells with the little circles inside are your cheek cells, which are eukaryotic, and the little dots are your oral bacteria. Eukaryotes have a nucleus and mitochondria. The singular of mitochondria are mitochondrium, and if they photosynthesize, they also have chloroplasts. Prokaryotes are always unicellular or composed of one cell. Eukaryotes can be either unicellular or multicellular. Now on to the 5 types of microorganisms in more detail. I keep putting 5 in quotation marks because your textbook talks about helminths, fungi, protozoa, bacteria, and viruses, but I can't resist tossing algae in. So that's why there's really 6, and I keep putting 5 in quotation marks. So let's talk about the characteristics of helminths. They are eukaryotic. In other words, their cells have a nucleus. They are multicellular, like this example here of an adult vinegar eel. They have microscopic eggs and larvae. They're transmitted the same as other infectious agents, and the immune system responds to them the same way that they do other infectious agents, which is why they're in microbiology, even though you can see them with your naked eye. This little fellow you can see with your naked eye if you really look hard, but it was a whole lot easier to see him with the light microscope. Now on to fungi. Fungi are eukaryotes that can be either unicellular or multicellular. You're familiar with both types. If you've ever made bread or beer, microbrewing being the popular hobby that it is, you've worked with unicellular fungi, like the picture of our yeast here. For multicellular fungi, I'm sure you've all experienced mold, like with my poor sad strawberries here. You also see mold on other fruit, bread, you name it. But multicellular fungi also comes in the form of mushrooms, which many of us enjoy. Now, like my poor sad strawberries here, fungi are important decomposers. They perform an important function in recycling cellulose and other organic molecules. I just wish they would have waited and left my strawberries alone so that I could eat them first. The book doesn't mention algae much, so we won't be covering them in any great detail, but I had to touch on them. Algae are photosynthetic eukaryotes. In other words, they have a nucleus and they take the light from the sun and convert it into sugars. They can be either unicellular, like the pond scum in this picture here, or they can be kelp or other kinds of seaweed. If you look closely here, you can see some bull kelp. Now on to the protozoa. Anything that is a unicellular eukaryote and doesn't fit in with the helminths, or animals, doesn't fit in with fungi or algae, are considered protozoa. Scientists who study the relatedness of organisms are currently reorganizing this kingdom of protozoa into 5 or 6, possibly 7 different kingdoms. Thankfully, in an introductory microbiology course like this one, you don't have to worry about that. So some examples of protozoa are parameciums and euglenoids that you will be observing in lab. I have a short clip of some euglenoids swimming around that I'm going to show you. So you can see here swimming around are some cute little euglenas. And you notice they're green. They're photosynthetic, non-pathogenic, an important part of the food chain. And see that huge old bubble there. In microbiology, it's good to be able to recognize what is something that you're looking for and something that's an artifact. But not all protozoa are non-pathogenic like the euglena. Some of them, like these Giardia, are pathogenic. Giardia causes backpackers diarrhea. Hopefully none of you have experienced that. But enough of the eukaryotes. Bacteria are prokaryotes. In other words, they don't have a nucleus or mitochondria. They are always unicellular. As you will learn in more detail later, they have a sugar protein molecule in their cell walls called peptidoglycan. This is one way that we can separate them from the other major group of prokaryotes, the archaea. We won't be discussing archaea much in this class. Bacteria, on the other hand, will form the bulk of what we discuss and the bulk of what you look at in lab. Bacteria are important decomposers. They produce most of the oxygen in the atmosphere, and they cause several important infectious diseases. Now let's talk about viruses. We've mentioned them before, but let's go over their characteristics again. Viruses are infectious agents that are not cells or are acellular. In the words of the textbook, viruses are small particles that exist at the level of complexity somewhere between large molecules and cells. I like to think of them as the ultimate parasite, whittled down to just what is needed to make a living off of other cells and survive the harsh, to them, environment between cells. They have genetic material, either DNA or RNA, but not both, wrapped in a protective protein shell or capsid. Some viruses pick up a membrane or envelope from the cell they have parasitized. Some viruses are non-pathogenic, replicating within cells without harming them. Some even help their hosts. Others, such as these influenza viruses and HIV, are important pathogens of humans. Whew, we made it. You should be more comfortable now with differentiating between prokaryotic and eukaryotic microorganisms, being able to identify a third type of microorganism. Can you guess what it is? Yeah, viruses. Compare and contrast the relative size of the different microbes.